Without further ado, I will start. I was born and raised in Jerusalem and moved to Samaria in the year 2000. And it really struck me when I understood that there were other holy sites in the Bible prior to Jerusalem. It's like Jerusalem kind of took over the Bible from the book of Samuel on, but there's so much going on before the book of Samuel. And the more I lived here and I visited all these sites that we're going to be speaking about in this course, the more I understood that there is so much to talk about and to learn from the time prior to pronouncing Jerusalem as the central holy place for the Israelites, the Bible, and the nations today. Also understood that between when Israel established its independence in 1948, the whole area that we are going to be talking about, which is basically Samaria and the Jordan Valley, were occupied by Jordan for 19 years. And this whole area that was really supposed to be a place of research, a place of archaeology, of Bible, immediately after 1948 was out of our grasp. And in 1967, when Israel liberated Judea and Samaria, we were able to actually go in there and start researching and going to all these places that we know prior to Jerusalem. And immediately after 1967, an emergency survey was proclaimed, and the groups of archaeologists starting frantically roaming around the mountains of Samaria, looking for places to research and to document, because the idea was that Jordan is just around the corner, and these areas might be returned to Jordan or given to the Arabs, the local Arabs. And so, this survey has been going on until today, because all these things never happened, and the mountains are still there for research, for archaeological research. And one of these crews was Adam Zertal, Professor Adam Zertal and his crew. And we have the honor of hosting Dr. Shay Bar, who is currently leading the Manasseh Hill Country Survey team, which is responsible for finding so many of these holy sites, or as it's called in archaeology, cultic sites, that are so important for the understanding of history and the Bible. So I will introduce Shay. Shay Bar received his PhD in archaeology from the University of Haifa in 2008. He is a researcher in the Zinman Institute and teaches in the archaeology department at this university. His current projects include directing the Manasseh Hill Country Survey and the excavations of Tel Esur and the Fatsael Valley Proto-Historic Project. Shay worked with the late Professor Adam Zertal for over 15 years. He is responsible for the scientific archaeological publication of the site. He is leading archaeologists working today in Samaria and the Jordan Valley, and extensively surveys and excavates sites in this important region. And may I also add that there is very strong discrimination against Israeli archaeologists that are working in Judea and Samaria. They're not getting grants, they're not getting any help from international funds that are discriminating Judea and Samaria and biblical research. And so Shay and his crew are real heroes. They're doing this sometimes with their own financial means in order to advance the scientific research of the biblical heartland of Israel. So without further ado, Shay, please, I'm unmuting you, and the microphone is yours.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Haifa in the north of Israel. I'll just share screen and we'll start today's presentation. Today, I'll be talking with you about discovery of a group of sites that we call foot-shaped enclosures, and you'll understand why soon. Dated to the Iron Age, and that were found in the Jordan Valley in the last 15 years, and it's ongoing. And the research is ongoing. It's not one of the famous sites that people visit when they come to Israel. It's maybe the most surprising secret site that were found in the last years. And as Aaron said, this is part of the Manasseh Hill Country Survey that began in 1978 by the late Professor Adam Zertal, who passed away 6 years ago. I was working with him 15 years, and now I continue the project in his footsteps, actually. This is the longest archaeological project in the world. It started in 1978. When I teach my students at the Haifa University, then I asked them, where were you in 1978? This won't work for you, because I see at least the some of the faces here. But for the students, of course, most of them were not even born at the time when Professor Zertal on Pratchett, after the 73 Yom Kippur War, he was injured there, started a survey by foot of the entire region that you can see on the map on the right side of the slide. All northern, central, and eastern Samaria and the Jordan Valley, between the Bet Shean Valley and the Jezreel Valley in the north, and the Dead Sea in the south, and the Jordan River in the east, and on the west, the coastal plain. This is about, I know it's small compared to Texas and Kansas and places that were heard before, but in Israel, the size, it's about 15% of the country. And in this area, were found more than 3,000 archaeological sites from the beginning of mankind in the region until World War I. But what's important is not the fact that we found so many sites that were not, is the fact that we found so many sites that were not known to archaeologists and to historians and to biblical research before, because almost more than 80% of the sites are new. So the entire history of the region is actually written again and published in Hebrew and in English. We already published 8 volumes in Hebrew and 7 volumes in English by Bill and Leiden. You can see an example there of the Manasseh Hill Country Survey, Volume 5, and you can see the volumes map again on the right. And we are advancing. We are now working on Volume 9 area. We're actually maybe a few years from the end of this very, very big and important project. And we're going to talk about today the area that you have, which is now on the map of volumes 2, 4, 5, and 9 of the survey, which is actually the Jordan Valley and the eastern fringes of Samaria. And this will be the focus of the lecture. Now, I want to show you some of the survey maps that we have. And I want to talk about chronology, about the periods, and to compare them with the biblical narrative. When we speak about the entrance of the Israelite people to the Promised Land, to Canaan, it occurred according to the one of the main chronology used by biblical and archaeological researchers at the beginning of a period, or the transition between 2 periods that we call the Late Bronze Age and the Iron Age 1. The Late Bronze Age is a almost 300 years in length period with Egyptian control in Canaan. And at the end of this period, around 1200 BC, there was a drastic change. And for about 200 years, the period that we call Iron Age 1 is a time of turmoil, of empires shrinking and new entities appearing in the Middle East. And one of these entities is is ancient Israel, actually, is the people of Israel. Now, this happened probably in the transition between the 13th and 12th century BCE, the beginning of the period we call Iron Age 1. Iron Age is ending in the destruction of the first temple in the 6th century BC. But Iron Age 1 is the first 200 years that if you read the Bible, it's the time of the conquests and the time before the kingdom, before King Shaul, and then later, of course, King David and King Shlomo. These are called Iron Age 2, the time of the kings. So it's the time of the conquest of the land, the first 200 years. Now, if you look at the map that we see here on the left, is the map of volume 4 of the survey, and it shows the white area is the surveyed area, and it showed 3 different regions. Can you see the thing I'm moving? Yeah, okay. So this is the southern Bet Shean Valley. This is Canaanite land for the entire period. This is what we call the narrow Jordan Valley, and this is the Sarta Bar ridge, the highest ridge in the area, and Wadi Farah, Nachal Tirza, is the main road leading from the Jordan Valley to central Samaria, to Shechem. Now, in this entire region, you can see the map of sites that were dated to the late Bronze Age, the time that the people of Israel were in Egypt or wandering in the desert, and Canaanite inhabited the region. And we can see that there is, every point is a site, and you can see that there are a group of sites in the north, in the Bet Shean Valley, and then there are only 2 sites in the narrow Jordan Valley and the Sarta Bar range. And actually, I can tell you that this site is a tomb, and this site is just a scatter of a few sherds from this period. So this area is virtually empty before the Iron Age period. People did not inhabit it. Well, there's not much water there, not much land for agriculture. That's logical for people to do. But look what happened in the same region, what we discovered in the Iron Age 1. This is the map of the Iron Age 1 site. Now you can see that there is a big change in population of the region and in the number of sites. In the north, in the area controlled by the Canaanites, the city-states of Bet Shean and Rehov, nothing much changed. But if you look at the narrow Jordan Valley and the Sarta Bar range, you can see there are many dots here, and every dot is a site from the Iron Age 1 period. Now you might say it's something that happened, occasionally or something like this. I'll show you the map going south in the direction of Jericho in volume 5 of the survey. This is the map of the late Bronze Age between the Sarta Bar range, the end of the Sarta Bar range, and Wadi Uja, which is just north of Jericho, one of the largest wadis that drains to the Jordan River. And in this area, these are new sites, new site places, new Jewish villages that are there today. But if we are looking again, the dot with the number, there is only 1 site from the late Bronze Age. Again, group of sherds in a small tale here, not far from Fetzael, which is a modern settlement. And again, I put the Iron Age 1 sites, and you can see there is a drastic change. Something happened in this transition phase between the late Bronze Age and the Iron Age in this region that was filled with many, many sites. Now we can see what these sites are. These sites are, most of them, are enclosure sites. What are enclosure sites? It's circular sites between 20 and 30 meters in diameter on the average, where you have few sherds, and these are sites of nomadic populations. We can see them also today. It's Bedouins, but these are Bedouins, not modern Bedouins. It's Iron Age Bedouins, Iron Age 1 Bedouins. And you can see the circular fence of today's Bedouins, and you can see, or in the plans or in the aerial view, the circular pens that survived more than 3,000 years, because we are in an almost desert area and things survive. And it's the same thing, it's even the same size. And when you look for the pottery of these inhabitants in order to date the construction or the use of these animal pens, you find it outside and not inside. And this is because outside there were tents, and inside there were animals, sheep and goats. Of course, then you don't have pottery, where do you have animals? So we found the pottery from the outside which is again a supporting claim for the nomadic population that inhabited the region. Now, who were these people? This is an immigration. What I've shown you, the maps that I've shown you, is of course not natural birth. People immigrated to the region in the Iron Age. They were nomadic, as I've seen you again, one slide, and they came only in a limited area, not more than 25 kilometers from south to north of Jericho and south of the Bet Shean Valley. Very strict, limited area. Now, if we read the Bible, we can ask ourselves, can these be the wandering people of Israel that were nomadic, of course, that crossed the Jordan River in the time of the conquest of Canaan, which is archaeologically the same period, Iron Age 1, and entered the promised land north of Jericho, which is the exact location that the Bible describes and that we have these sites, as the book of Joshua recounts. So in archaeology, there are proofs, there are facts, and there are assumptions. The fact is that we have a nomadic population that immigrated to this area in the Iron Age 1. We can assume, according to the text of the Bible, and I'm not now getting into the problem of historicity of the Bible, of does it recount actual historical facts all the way, or just in part of it, and this is a big debate that I'm sure you're all aware of. But here we have a fine example that we can assume that these sites that we found, this nomadic population that entered this region in the 12th century BCE, might be the same people that the book of Joshua and the books of Judges recount their stories. Now, let's talk about the food-shaped enclosures. In this part of this, more than 200 sites that were found in the Jordan Valley and in eastern Samaria, we have a group of 5, let's say, it's debatable, 5 enclosure sites that are not small sites that we've seen, the small enclosures, but they are usually very big enclosure sites and very different from the small Bedouin encampments. Now, what's interesting is you can see that in the map on the left, we have this nice symbol of a foot shape that we created, and we have them in some sort of a line in the Jordan Valley. We have here 3. This is Wadi Far, the main entry road from the Jordan Valley to Samaria, to central Samaria that I suggested, but we have it only from the area here. And we have here another one called Masua, another one called Yafit. And then we have 2 other such sites, one in the north here and one in the south here, which are the eastern slopes of Samaria. And this will be the focus of our discussion. But what's interesting to say is that each one of these larger food-shaped enclosure is surrounded by between 5 and 10 of the smaller family Bedouin enclosure that we saw, which suggests that this is their gathering area. This is the place that they come when they want to meet, when they want to do things. So these are the food-shaped enclosure. The first and well-preserved food-shaped enclosure is called the Argaman food-shaped enclosure, or Bedet Eshab is the local Arabic name of the place. Now we'll always have the map that you can see where the site is, and we'll try to bring aerial and hand sketches of the site itself and talk about different features of the site. But when we talk about a foot or a foot-shaped enclosure, this is probably the best example. You can actually see the heel and the front of the foot, and even maybe some can see toes here, which maybe is a little exaggeration, but we can certainly see the figure of the foot, and that's why we call them foot-shaped enclosure. Now, this is the largest foot-shaped enclosure. It is to the south of Argaman, here, as I said, near the main road leading to central Samaria and running along the Jordan River from north to south. And as I said, surrounded by smaller nomadic sites that probably used it as a main gathering site or cultic site. Now, this specific site is the size of a large football ground, like something like 120 meters from north to south, and this axis on a maximum of almost 50 meters east-west. And it is like 15 to 20 times bigger than the small enclosure sites. So it's something completely different. And it has some very interesting features that I want to show you. The first thing, of course, is the surrounding wall that we see here. This surrounding wall, and of course everything you can see here also, is what gives the shape of the foot shape. Now, this wall, and this is what's good in the researching sites in desert or semi-desert areas, is that what you have is what was there in the past. I mean, it was not covered by later construction. People usually did not drop stones here because there are not too many rich cities in the region or things that need to rob stones. So this is probably the shape it was intended. And one of the things that we saw from the beginning when we arrived there is that there is no stone collapse. Meaning the walls, this surrounding wall with this strange shape, was not intended to block someone from entering or exiting, but it was maybe intended to symbol something by the way it was built. Now, this wall is divided into two sections. The northern section, the largest one, is actually a wall less than 1 meter wide, usually of 2 or 3 stones in width, and preserved not more than 2 stones high and there is no collapse. And here there was an entrance. You can see that there is a paved entrance here, like a funnel, to enter inside. And there is the southern part of the what we call the heel of this foot shape. And what's interesting in this southern side, and you can see it also here very nicely, and I'll show you a clearer picture soon from nearby, is that it is not built in the same way. It's actually a built path, a built road that surrounds the southern part of this big enclosure, the hill. So people can either enter here to the inside or walk, surround some of the site, at least the southern part, here. And this is something very strange and very unique. Now, 2 other features that we have to show. One, in the north, near the end, the forefront of the leg, we have this round structure. You'll see it from near a picture or 2, which we'll talk about soon. We term it Bama, high place, but this is an interpretation, of course. And we have another enclosure in the middle, which is actually built differently. And now we can understand why. So these are the main features of the site. Now, you can see here the archaeological stone by stone sketch of the excavation. All these numbers are places that were excavated, and the site was excavated in the beginning by Dr. Dror Ben Yosef. His PhD was on these foot-shaped enclosure sites in the Jordan Valley, supervised by the late Professor Adam Zertal, and he was the first excavator of the site. And he excavated in different locations in the site. And it's interesting because he found pottery that dates from the Iron One to the transition to the Iron 2A, the time of the United Monarchy, to the period we call Iron 2B, which ends at about the 8th century BCE. And this means that the site was used for almost 500 years. It's not a short period site. People continued coming back to the site and do whatever they did there. We can assume what they did there, but it's not a place that was for a short period. And on the contrary, people did not live here. We don't have rooms. We don't have structures. We don't have tools made by people that used to live, like farmers that will find farmer tools and everything. We don't have this. This is something that was used for almost 500 years. People came here to do something and then went back to their probably tents in the nearby and keep this site unharmed and actually without people living inside. Now, what happened in the 8th century is interesting because the reforms of King Yeshaya It's one of the reasons that they stopped all the, made the very important religious reforms, and he prevented.
That's King Josiah.
Josiah, of course, in English. I use the Hebrew. We'll have Hebrew English things here because sometimes it's important to say the Hebrew to read in the original text. In this case, of course, King Josiah and his reforms, King of Judea, and he banned, of course, all the worship in other places other than Jerusalem. And maybe this is why this site stopped at the time from being something maybe cultic, which is, of course, just a suggestion that it's a cultic site. It's certainly not a regular site for dwelling or even for animal husbandry. Now, we've looked for this type of plan of site, this foot-shaped thing, throughout the entire Mediterranean region, from Nubia, Sudan in the south, to Turkey in the north, in Iraq and Iran, and we found nothing similar in nowhere, which is amazing because usually you have things that are similar that you can compare to, but we don't only have these 5 sites that I will show you that have this special figure. Now let's see the path from the south. You can see here in the pictures and on the drawings, you see there's big stones from 2 sides and smaller stones in between. People did not, of course, walk on the stones. This is actually the bedding that they use packed earth. And this is only the foundation of this road that encircles part of the site. Now, another thing that we can see in the lower picture here is that this site, and actually all the other sites except one, are located between a natural proto-theater, which means that people can sit here, you can see here, and see what's happening down below in the enclosure. This can house a few thousand people. There were no 1,000 people at the time in Jordan Valley, but this can house many, many people. And we're going to talk about this proto-theater phenomenon while continuing the lecture. And this is the round structure, about 5 meters in diameter. It was excavated only from the outside by draw. And it's interesting because they found here mainly cooking pots. Unlike, I know some of you know, I've talked about in previous course about the Gilgal site, and there you have bones that were butchered and burned, signs of offerings. Here you don't have this. Here you have many, many cooking pots. I call it the first barbecue of the Israelites, because this is something very unique. The fact that almost all of the pottery was found here is cooking pots. I mean, this was made for cooking. Somebody cooked here lots of things. And the bones were again sheep and goat, sheep and goat, sheep and goat, all the way around. Now, less than 2 years ago, in the midst of the pandemic, we decided to return to the site and to make a small-scale excavation in one of the 2 problematic areas of the site, the courtyard in the center, and that's the excavation we see here, and of course, the round structure. Because while the outer wall was dated to the Iron Age, these 2 features were not well dated. So I can now tell you, it was not published yet, but I can now tell you that the thing in the center, and even looking at this aerial view and looking how these walls are constructed, and you can see a very nice image here, by the way, image by Aaron Lipkin, flying his, our Air Force, the Air Force of the survey. And we can see that the method of construction is completely different. And in fact, what we see in this part that we excavated, it's this corner of area D courtyard. And it is actually a Roman period courtyard, meaning Romans came here after the site was abandoned, few hundred years, about 600 years after the site was abandoned. And they used this area to, again, dwell nomadically. And you can see these are pottery, these drawings of pottery from the Roman period. And we also did OSL, which is a kind of dating procedure optical luminescence dating, and it also gave dates in the Roman period. So we are quite sure now that the courtyard in the middle is a later feature that was constructed at the site because there were stones there. So people constructed a big courtyard in the middle, which was probably used to gather either flocks or to gather agricultural products. This happens a lot in the Roman period because it was a time of lots of activity in the Jordan Valley, and we have lots of Roman agricultural features. And for the first time, we cut and excavated inside the round structure, the Bama. And we found out actually that the wall is more than 1 meter wide. We didn't know it when we were excavating from the outside. You don't know the width of the wall. But we know that it's now a 1 meter wide wall built of very large boulders. And again, the excavations inside until we reached the natural earth produced Iron Age pottery, which is very important because this dates this feature to the Iron Age 1. And also, actually, we have here Iron Age 1, and this is Iron Age 2. So the continual use of this structure in the until the 8th century is now proven. So this is the site of Beit Shab. Now I'll talk about the other one. It was excavated, again, at first by Dor Ben Yosef. This is called Yafit. Yafit 3. Those of you that know the Jordan Valley, the fact that you see houses is quite rare. And this is the main business area of the Jordan Valley where you can have coffee. Jordan Valley is very remote and unfortunately not very well developed. So, but this is close by to the place where everybody stopped for gasoline and having a good coffee or ice cream. And not far away was discovered another foot-shaped enclosure. As you can see from the picture, it is already taken from a proto-theater. This is not an aerial picture. This is a picture from people that could sit here and see what's happening here below at Yafit Shalosh. And even from the survey map of the site, you can see that, again, we have this strange shape with maybe an entrance. And here in Yafit, the entire perimeter of the enclosure is a road, like we had in Argaman, today about 15 kilometers to the northeast. We had only the hill there was a path, a built path, and here the built path is surrounding the entire site. So we have, this is where we excavated it, and you can see the big stones, the same way of construction, the same masonry as those that was implemented in the Beit Shab enclosure, and the small stones in the middle. You can see here that we have to excavate to actually see it. It was less preserved than the one in Beit Shab. And you can see also here, and the fantastic proto-theater. People can sit here, many people, very conveniently, and see what's happening inside. This is a reconstruction, and you can see that here we don't have, for example, any structure, big structure within like we have in Argaman, because every enclosure is slightly different from the others. But what was found here, and very important, is these 4 small sherds, tiny sherds, that were found in the foundation trench of the wall, meaning they date the earliest possible date of construction of this structure. And these colored sherds are late Bronze Age. So it gives us a date in the beginning of the Iron Age, not sometimes in the 200 years of the Iron Age or continuing until the 8th century in the Iron Age too, but even in the beginning, the transitional phase, and this is very important. The discovery of these sherds in the foundation trench of the surrounding wall. Another one, and this is a sad story, in between the Beit Shab and the Yafit Shalosh that we've seen, is called Masua 4. It was surveyed, not excavated. Again, you can see the foot shape, and that is built of like 2 enclosures with the meeting the joint of the 2 sides. It was originally heard by many of these small gullies. You can see here from an aerial photography. And these are the sherds. These are all actually Iron 1. This site probably did not continue to the Iron 2. I used to talk a lot with Adam about this site because I was not convinced that it's the same type of site. We like to discuss and talk about these things. And he used to tell me, well, you should go and excavate it sometimes, which was a good idea at the time. Unfortunately, I did not make it because this site is destroyed. It's not existent anymore. It was destroyed without being salvage excavated when a factory was built on it. And this is very sad, but this site is not existent anymore. Well, at least we have the data of the survey, which is of course luck, but we cannot do further research at this site, unfortunately. Another site is the northernmost one, the one that here is just below the Moor thing. It's called El Unuk. This is the first one to be discovered, actually, by Zertal. It was published in volume 2 many, many years ago. You can see it here, and the plan and an aerial view of the site. It's interesting because this site has some characteristics like it's like 2 enclosures with a meeting, and it also has a circular structure, like the one we saw in Argaman, maybe. You can see it's this one here. Very interesting, but unlike the other foot-shaped enclosure, it does not have a proto-theater, and actually, if you can see at the topography, it is built like a fort. And here again, I am not in agreement with my dear friend, my late Professor Adam Zertal. I think it's a fortified site from the Iron Age one, and you can see the finds from the survey, a very important one. And actually, if I could excavate any site now in Samaria that I want, this will be the one that I'll go there. And the reason is this thing that looks like faces. And these are actually handles of jars. And these handles of jars are unique to Samaria in the Iron Age, and they were found mainly in large quantities at 2 sites, Mount Eival and Shiloh, the 2 most important cultic sites of the period. And of course, Mount Eival and Shiloh were excavated. This site was only surveyed, and still more than a dozen of these handles were found here. So either this was an important cultic place that we are not aware of the early Israelites in the region, or it was the place that these handles, these jars with handles, were manufactured. And this is part of the early Israelite bureaucracy. Probably meaning that from here, things were sent from different communities of the Israelite people to the cultic places at Shiloh and Eival. So this is very, very interesting, very important. Unfortunately, as you are probably aware of the political situation in Judea and Samaria, this site is located in what is in the Oslo Agreement called Area B, which means that Israeli researchers cannot do any research there. So unless something changed, I cannot go and excavate this very important site and learn more about the Israelite presence in the Iron Age in the Jordan Valley. Unfortunately, but I hope maybe in the future I can. And the last one, and actually the last one to be found, it's called Shay Bar. It's this one. And it's the tiniest. It's the smallest one. And it was found in a survey, and we also had an excavation there. It is located to the west of Jericho, Tel Sultan, about 10 kilometers. And this is part of the excavation, and it's actually, again, Iron Age and Roman, as we talked about, as we've seen a lot in these sites. We have Iron Age pottery, and then we have a reuse in the Roman period. Now, Mount Eival, we've talked about it in the previous course, but we cannot prevent us from seeing that Area A, this is what we call the altar, the main structure, is located, you see, within a small enclosure. And then the entire site is located inside a bigger enclosure. So you have the main structure in Mount Eival, and then you have 2 enclosures, and you can imagine, it's an assumption. Also here, we have a foot shape. If this is the hill, and this is the forefront, with the main structure in the forefront, like we saw in Bet Shagan and Unuk. And also here, but just the opposite way around. This is like the hill maybe, and this is the forefront with the main structure. So this is not a fact, this is an assumption, but it's very interesting. And then if these foot-shaped enclosures are cultic, and they are part of the Israelite tradition, and if even Mount Eval, which is certainly part of the Israelite tradition and is cultic, has this foot-shaped idea in it, what is happening with Jerusalem? Can it be that Jerusalem has nothing to do with foot-shaped enclosures or something like this? Of course it can. 100 years passed between the Eval and the Jerusalem, but maybe not. So I'll just give you one a picture of from the Bible Lands Museum in Jerusalem, and I hope that you'll be able to come and visit and see this fantastic museum. And there they have an image, a replica of what Iron Age Jerusalem should have looked like. And you tell me if you see a foot shape. Look at the walls of Jerusalem. Is this the hill, the front with the, of course, the temple? So, okay, it's just an assumption, of course. But again, we have something that looks like a human foot. And we'll go back to this again. Now, this is to scale, just to see the difference in size. So the largest one is Argaman, and the smallest one is Shab Romani. You can see that we can have like 10 Shab Romanis in one Argaman, or even more. It's the baby of Masuan. But this is the real size of things that we have to show. And again, look at the idea of like large enclosure, small enclosure, and a joint, large enclosure, small enclosure, and a joint here and here and here, everywhere. It's the same idea. Is it a foot shape? It's a good question. Now, the fact is that as long as we know, they did not have drones in the Iron Age. And also satellite photography was only at the beginning. But what they did have is proto-theaters. You can see that except from El Unuk, the one that I said that I'm not sure is a foot-shaped enclosure, but all the others have a viewing platform, high viewing platform above the sides. So they can see the shape. The shape has a meaning. And people that are gathering here and looking down, even if it's either in Argaman, in unfortunately non-existent Masua, in Yafit, in Shab Romani, could sit and see A, the foot-shaped enclosure, and B, what the hell is going inside. So now we'll go back to the Bible. And we can now say that the late Professor Zertal suggested that these foot-shaped enclosures are very important biblical Gilgal sites. Now, what are Gilgal sites? Today, when you drive Road 90 in the Jordan Valley, there is a modern kibbutz called Gilgal. But this is not a name of a place. Gilgal is actually a type of a place. It's like saying farm, fort, city, village, then you say Gilgal. It's a place of gathering and cult of the people of Israel when they entered Canaan. It is mentioned 39 times in the Bible, almost exclusively in Joshua and Judges, the Iron Age one, 200 years of the beginning. Then they disappear. And most mentions are either in the Jordan Valley or in eastern Samaria, sloping to the Jordan Valley. That's the location. And there are probably at least 6 different Gilgal sites. I'll show you why we say it. Now, until now, not a single site was correctly identified as Gilgal. There is near Jericho a place called Khirbe Gilgil, which is a Byzantine tradition, saying that that's the place of the Gilgal mentioned in the Bible. But that's a Byzantine tradition, and that's not modern research. Now we have a group of sites that we can suggest are the biblical, for the first time actually, that there are these biblical Gilgal sites. Now, why is Gilgal so important? So I won't read everything because I don't have time to read, but this is the most famous Gilgal is what we call the Jericho Gilgal, which is where the circumcision of the people of Israel that wandered in the Sinai Peninsula for 40 years happened, and the first ever Passover was celebrated. This is mentioned in Joshua 5. And this is the same Gilgal, probably, in Judges 3, where Judge Ehud is mentioned on his way to kill Eglon, king of Moab. And Samuel, the Gilgal for Samuel was a very important place. And you can see in 1 Samuel 7, Samuel continued as Israel's leader all the days of his life. From year to year, he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mitzpah, judging Israel in all those places. Again, a place of gathering and judging people, and a cultic place. And in this place is where he crowned one of the coronations of King Saul. So this Gilgal thing is a very important location. It's in the time of the early Israelites. This is one of their most important gathering and cultic activities places. But there are other mentions of different Gilgals. For example, there is the Gilgal of the blessings and the curses on Ival and Rezin. On Deuteronomy 11, there is the direction that Moses gives of how to enter the land. By the way, this is the tradition that bypasses the Jericho tradition. Well, because you don't cross the river and you go to fight Jericho, you cross the river and you go to make the blessings and the curses on Mount Ebal and Rezin, and you build there a temple, etc., etc. And when the Israelites are sitting on the Jordanian mountain, on Mount Nebo, and there are directions to go to Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, you have to cross the Jordan westwards, of course, toward the setting sun. And this is a nice vision. If you're from the Jordanian mountain, you see the setting sun on the mountains of Samaria, near the great trees of Moreh, what we call Alonei Moreh, in the territory of the Canaanites living in the Arava, Jordan Valley, in the vicinity of Gilgal. So Zertal suggested that this Gilgal is the Gilgal of Vadifara, Nachal Tirza, El Ulukwan, the one that I wish to excavate one day. Because that's the direction to go from the Jordan Valley, cross the Jordan River and go to Mount Ebal. That's the Gilgal that's situated as a signpost on the way. But there are other Gilgals. There's a Gilgal in the story of Elijah and Elisha, and there is another Gilgal that's a boundary sign between Judah and Benjamin that appears in Joshua 15. And actually, this Gilgal could be the small Gilgal of Shar Lamani, which is located not far from the area of Adumim. So maybe that's that Gilgal, etc., etc. I don't have, of course, time to give all the examples. But another interesting thing is I'm going back to Argaman, to Beit Ishaq, to the first food check enclosure I showed you. And I want to remind you of a very important story of the Bible that appeared in Joshua 22, a story of a cultic site built by the 2.5 tribes located outside Canaan, that they wanted to build their own cultic place because it's a long way to Shiloh to go all the way. And when these tribes came to Glilot near the Jordan in the land of Canaan, not in the land that they lived to the east of the river, west, in the land of Canaan, the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half tribes of Manasseh built an imposing altar there by the Jordan. So they built an imposing altar. Can this be the site that we found in Argaman? Well, I can tell you there are no other big sites from the period that can be, because we surveyed the entire area. But this is a good possibility. And actually, what almost happened there is a war between brothers, because the whole assembly of the other tribes gathered at Shiloh to go to war against them. And unfortunately, I cut this here, Pinchas, the prophet, stopped them, and there was no war. And then what they say, let's go and build an altar, but not for burnt offerings or sacrifices. On the contrary, it is to be a witness between us and you and the generation that follow, that will worship the Lord at his sanctuary. Meaning they are building an altar of a memory. It's like a statue of memory to the unity of the people, and not to the not union, and maybe this is what we have in Argaman. Now, in Psalm 78, which is a very fantastic.
One second, Shai, I have to stop you for a second. What you're
Yeah.
saying is that the reason why you didn't find any scorched bones in Argaman could be that the Bama at the Argaman footprint structure was not used as an altar, but the reason why you found only cooking pots is because it wasn't an altar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's an altar. Yeah.
and that corresponds with the story of the tribes of the East.
Yeah. So they built this Bama and made good happenings there, good festivals there that are not connected to, they are connected to feasting, to peaceful feasting, and not to burning animals and sacrificing them according to the law, because they wouldn't do it, because that's what they agreed between brothers. Now, in the Psalm 78, and this is a very good example of why you have to read the Bible in Hebrew, and not, this is King James Version, I use King James Version, but if you want to maybe understand things, sometimes the translation is always a problem. Of course, it's a problem in every historical work. You have to read history from in the language that it was written, and not translation, because in Psalm 78, God was very furious with the people of Israel. He was always furious with the people of Israel because they made bad things, idols, etc. But look what he says, and this is one of the chapters that is actually retelling the history of the people. And he said that he abandoned the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent he had set up among humans. Now, I don't know if you can read Hebrew. Some of you maybe can, most of you probably can't. But if I read this in Hebrew, which is the original, and not look at the translation, I can read, Veitosh Mishkan Shiloh, he abandoned the tabernacle of Shiloh, Ohel Shiken be'Adam, tent he had set up in Adam. Now, Adam is human. That's true. Adam is one of the ways to translate Adam is human. Now, here the meaning is he abandoned the tabernacle of Shiloh, where people could see him, visualize him, and now he came to inside the people, to inside the man. God was inside every man. But Adam, which is human, Adam, is also a place name in the Jordan Valley, less than 3 kilometers from the Bedet Shay Bar enclosure, which is Adam, Damia, Tel Damia, an Iron Age site. And these are the Damia crossing, one of the most important crossings of the Jordan River. So can God abandon the tabernacle of the Shiloh and move to Bedet Shay to be there for a time? Is this the story, some kind of a repeating of a memory of the story that we had before of this building an altar at a place near Adam? We will return to the problem of translation also in another, near the end of the lecture. Now, we've seen these food shapes. We also, the people in the Iron Age, these nomadic people, could see this food shape because they were sitting in nice proto-theaters. But this food shape has a meaning. Now here we are coming to assumptions. I've shown you several facts. Oh, here and there I added some assumptions, but many facts. And now I go back to the theory that the late Professor Zertal has very interestingly shown connected to the foot shape. Now, foot shape are cultic things in many cultures, especially in the Middle East, but everywhere. And we can see here a late Bronze Age temple in a place called Ein Dara, northern Syria, unfortunately completely blown by ISIS Daesh in the last war there. We have now new wars, unfortunately, but in the war in Iraq and Iran and northern Syria. But you can see this temple, which is built the same way the temples were built in the Bronze and Iron Age, and also the temple in Jerusalem was built in the same three cells temple, what we call. And in the entrance, you can see the foot shape of God when you enter the temple, here in large limestone blocks. And you can see it's not human foot, of course, it's large. And so foot were used in as a sign of God and temples already by the Canaanite tradition, but actually it was already much before, because when you look at desert area, mainly you have what we call petroglyphs, which is a marking on stones that we have a lot in deserted areas, and you can see them. Many foot shapes these are very common. Foot shape, you can see them foot shapes, and you can see animals, and it's very common, and it occurs from prehistoric periods to modern periods. The use of foot is a holy sign. But let's look at the origin of the written sources that we have. And the most important one, especially if we read the Bible, where the Israelite came from, they came from Egypt. And in Egypt, stepping means controlling. If you step, you control. When people write letters to Queen Hatshepsut or to King Thutmose III or to any other Egyptian king or queen, they are always at the feet or under the feet of the king. This is the way diplomacy is made in the late Bronze Age. We are here in the 15th century BCE, these two examples, but this goes on. All life stability, all the lands, all the foreign countries are at the feet of this good goddess, the queen, etc. And I spread the enemies under your feet throughout the foreign countries. This is the way you talk, you write, your scribe writes to the king. Now, if we look at even more a clearer example, King Tutankhamun, the only king, small king, child king that we have his grave with all his grave goods, we can see his footstool and his sandals, and his stepping, in both cases, on his enemies. You can see here Nubian enemies, and also here Nubian enemies, and you can see the 9 arches, which means the enemies of Egypt. And he's constantly stepping on them. When he sits, when he walks, he's stepping on them. So in Egypt, stepping on is controlling. Now, let's look at the Bible. And actually, before Adam entered this very interesting journey, I never thought of foot and the Bible. It was not in my mind at all. But Adam recognized 4 main ideas that I will shortly present here. First one, the foot is the sign of territorial ownership. And I give 1 or 2 examples for every reason. In Deuteronomy 11, every place whereon the soles of your foot shall tread shall be yours. Or in Joshua 1, every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon that I've given unto you, as I said unto Moses. Now, you can say every place that you walk on, every place that you sit on, every place that you come to. No, every place, the sole of your foot. This is used on purpose, the sole of your foot. Then there is the Egyptian version. Stepping is controlling. 1 Kings 5, to King Solomon, thou knowest how that David, my father, could not build a house unto the name of the Lord his God for the wars which were about him on every side, until the Lord put them, the enemies, under the soles of his feet. Or in Psalm 47, we shall subdue the people under us and the nations under our feet. This is actually the Egyptian version, used also in the Bible. Now, a third interesting idea of foot in the Bible is that it is God's temple. Now, this is interesting. And this is mainly in the late prophets, in Isaiah. The glory of Lebanon shall come unto thee, the fir tree, the pine tree, and the box together, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious. So God's sanctuary is the place of his feet. Or thus said the Lord, the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house that you build unto me? Again. And the last and the fourth one is the symbol of the connection between land, people, and God's promise to the people. In 2 Kings 21, neither will I make the feet of Israel move any more out of the land which I gave their fathers. Not the people of Israel, not the nation of Israel, not the man of Israel. The feet of Israel has to be moved. And Ezekiel 43 is my favorite. It also connects the temple vision, but God is saying to the prophet, and he said unto me, son of man, the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever. I think I can say no more after this thing. The people are, God is saying in the soles of his feet, in the people of Israel. Now another problem with Hebrew translations, or actually for the English translation of the Hebrew written sources. And this is the meaning of what we call aliyah laregel. I hope you understand this meaning, but in Exodus 23, it is translated, 3 times thou shalt keep feast unto me in the year. Means 3 times the 3 big holidays, people go to Jerusalem. And again, it's a problem of translations because nobody is saying feast in Hebrew. In Hebrew, we say shalosh regalim techugli b'shala. 3 regalim, you will celebrate in the year for me. Now, what is this regalim? The translator translated a feast, but a regel is a foot. So 3 foots you shall celebrate to me during the year. Now in Hebrew we have a problem of, we say aliyah laregel, aliyah going up to the foot. Now if it was going up by foot to Jerusalem, we would say aliyah ba regel. Now it says aliyah laregel, la is to, so it's going to the foot. Can this is a memory of the first habits of the people of Israel entering Canaan, that they go to the foot to celebrate, aliyah laregel. This is very hard for me to explain in English. I hope you understood what I mean. So since I ran out of time, I will summarize fastly. There are 5 built enclosures that were found in the Jordan Valley, dated to the Iron One, that as an archaeologist, the best thing I can say is that they are cultic structures. Their shape is unparalleled in any other place in the ancient world, and they resemble a human foot. As I said, they are probably cultic, and Zertal identified them as the biblical Gilgal sites, which are strongly support this suggestion, and the possibility that one of these sites, the Gaman Beret Shad enclosure, is the imposing altar mentioned in Joshua 22. The meaning of the foot shape was just released a few years ago by the late Professor Adam Zertal with his book that was lately published in English, fortunately not yet published in Hebrew, and the meaning is, I gave a snapshot of all his idea, because this book gives a very detailed reasoning for every small thing that I said. And it is an ongoing project. We are trying to excavate more, to research more, to learn more about the sites, to better date them. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we do not succeed. It's a very meticulous and not very easy task. These are nomadic structures, not rich in finds, but we do our best to continue and research in this area. As Aaron said, if we wouldn't do it, nobody probably would do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shay. And we are now moving to the second portion of the session, and that is questions and answers. In this online course, we would like to move to a Q&A by audio. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use your microphone and ask Dr. Shay. We're going to have 15 minutes, so please try to have your questions brief and only one question per person. So who will be our first person to ask questions?
Aaron, if it's okay, I have a quick question. It's Neil Johnson. Dr. Bar, Dr. Shay, or Aaron, since it seems there are so many references to additional sites, where do you next expect to find one? If you do, and where are you most probably going to find that site, do you think?
The most important Gilgal site was not found. It's the one in Jericho.
Correct.
It's the most important. Now, the thing is that Jericho is an area. It's not a specific location. So Zertal suggested, and I think it might be right, that the well-preserved Argamanuk site is also the Jericho Gilgal. But we cannot, of course, prove it. It's just an assumption. We have almost finished the survey. We finished the survey surrounding Jericho, and we didn't find any. This area is very much destroyed by agriculture, lots of palm plantations, and then we have the entire area of Jericho which we cannot survey because it's area A, and which we are not allowed to enter there. So if there was a biblical Jericho Gilgal, which is not one of the ones that we found, which was closer to the ancient city of Jericho, and then I'd say it's probably not existent anymore. But hopefully I'm wrong, but this is the most reasonable answer I have.
There was another question. Someone asked about the verse from Psalms, the issue with Adam. It was unclear, so if you can repeat that again. I believe this was Janice. Janice asked about the issue of Adam and Psalms.
When you translate something and you're not familiar with the geography and the habitation phases in the region that you translate the story of, then you translate what's more, I do translations also of theater things as part of my hobby. And it's difficult when you don't know exactly what's happening in the region. Now, I'm sure that the translators of this phrase, the King James Bible, are the ones from earlier, because I never saw anything that is not translated like this. In any other translations in English of the biblical phrase, were not aware or did not think that there is the importance of a place name called Adam, which is the name that appears in the Hebrew version. And it says Be Adam, in Adam. Now you can translate in Adam as in a human. It's a good translation, it's an option. But you must say it also can be in Adam, the city of that is called Adam, which is just located nearby Argaman. And I don't know what, there's no truth here, but it's something that if you know the geography and you know the existence of a place called Adam in the Jordan Valley, in that region, it's an important crossroad of the River Jordan, then you maybe should consider that the God moved from the Shiloh to another place and not to inside a human.
And so, in other words, the verse is a parallel verse, and the Shiloh is parallel to the word Adam. And which are both names of places, geographical places, and not a metaphorical translation, a metaphorical term for a human. Adam is not a human. Adam, in this case, is the name of the city that is adjacent or close to Argaman. And I think that it would be logical to think that if the Philistines are attacking Shiloh from the west, it would be safe to take the tabernacle eastward, far away from the Philistine. So that actually makes a lot of sense. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have
Yes.
one, Rick Moe. At El Unuk, how high are the walls? You said it might be a fortification rather than one of these footsteps. So how high are the walls that go around them? Are they higher than at Argamon?
Well, they are higher than Argaman, and there is a stone collapse in the slope, but without excavations, we cannot say. But it's certainly not a pass, it's a wall, and it's surrounding the crown of the hill, the top of the hill, and it looks like a very nice fortified site. What was happening inside, or if it's really a fortification wall, is something that only excavation can answer, unfortunately.
It will also be good
Aaron?
to add that Adam Zertal, in his book, The Footsteps of God, identified El Unuk as Gilgal Elon Moreh, which is mentioned in Deuteronomy 11 when describing where Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal are.
Aaron? Yeah. Thank you, Professor Bar. Extraordinary presentation. I've had the privilege of early on being with Aaron in this little journey. And so I've been to Gilgal Argamon 4 times and bring my groups there. And I'm still bewildered and in awe. It was a little bit confusing to me in terms of your historical chronology. The functional place of Gilgal Argamon in the history of the conquest coming into the land, you seem to indicate that these sites were not cultist sites. Was this not a site of origin that what might have been an original kind of entrance of worship of Hashem, where the tabernacle would have been in Gilgal Argamon, or are they taking it directly up to the Ebal Gerizim area? And so it's just a commemorative site of sorts, or was there potential of an initial place of cultist worship that would have included the tabernacle at Gilgal Argamon, particularly, especially given its size and given the theater size is just extraordinary to experience. And I asked the question because of the Ehud passage. So it's at the stones of Gilgal that he returns, and that corresponds to the issue of possession. He remembered that King Eglon is trespassing on land that belongs to God. That was enough to have him return and do the job because remembering who it belongs to. Now, I'll leave it at that because we could talk for at least an hour.
Well, when you come next time to Israel, maybe we can discuss there on the side.
I'm hoping a year from now I'm bringing another group.
Okay, so, well, I don't have a good answer because this is archaeology. And it's very hard to give good answers in archaeology. I think that the foot-shaped enclosure at Argaman, the best preserved foot-shaped enclosure, the largest, definitely, is probably one of the Gilgals. I cannot say it's the Gilgal of Jericho. I don't know. I cannot say which. I cannot pinpoint exactly a Gilgal or mention in the Bible to a specific place because there's a group of sites. And again, the suggestion that this is the imposing altar is actually is not Adam's suggestion, because Adam insisted that the imposing altar was on the ridge of the Sartaba, the mountain of the Sartaba, which is the highest peak in the Jordan Valley. And I spent with him about 20 days looking for Iron Age pottery there. It's a Hashmonean, late Hellenistic Roman fortress, then rebuilt by King Herod as a palace. Fantastic site, and he was certain this is the place where there should be the imposing altar, because this is the most imposing thing you see in the Jordan Valley. But unfortunately, we did not find Iron Age pottery, not even a good amount that suggested there was something there. So it's a possibility, of course. It's just an assumption. It could have been that they built something in Tel Damia, which was never excavated, which is on the Jordan Ford, the Adam Ha'ir itself. and it's minefielded completely now, and nobody will excavate there probably. So this is one of the things. It's just an assumption. We don't have fact. We cannot prove such a thing. So I can't give you a good answer.
We're only allowed one question, so I want to make one comment. I found the most profound thing for myself initially is that Gilgal Argaman is directly across from Yavok River in the Jordan, the Jabbok in American Jews who can't speak Hebrew. And so it's almost like Hashem, homiletically speaking, is bringing us back to the origins of the story. Egypt was just a little interruption. So coming right back to where Israel becomes Israel at the Jabbok, and now the story is still going to continue because there's a consummating purpose. And I find that to be an extraordinary thing that you can actually see the Jabbok from this location. It's sort of like, this is where it began, and now we're returning to the story, and God's going to consummate this ultimately in terms of Jerusalem.
Thank you for that comment, Rabbi Jerry.
Well, what I can add another thing, which is I think is important, because I've shown you in the beginning of the lecture, when we were young, that there are these sites that we found, these nomadic population sites, that starts in the area of Argaman to the north of Madifara, where the footcheck of Argaman is. I mean, there are a few sites, few nomadic sites to the north, but that's the end, the northern end of this phenomenon. And it ends, now that we've surveyed the Jericho area, it does not reach Jericho. We don't have Iron Age in Jericho, which also supports the notion that what we call Jericho is the Jericho region, not Jericho specific city. And therefore, it's more plausible that the sites were slightly to the north, and the Damia crossing, which is the Abuk crossing, is the best candidate for crossing the Jordan, even for the people of Israel, and because it's north of Jericho. It doesn't have to be, about 5 meters north of the Dead Sea. It can be 15 kilometers from the Dead Sea. So what? That's the crossing point.
Three more questions.
Thank you.
We have a question from Beit Lechem Ministries. Yes.
So when Beit Lechem visits you, will Lipkin Tours take us to all 6 of these sites?
We will try to take you to as many as possible. Some of them, as mentioned, are in areas that are under the Palestinian Authorities' control, and we cannot reach them. And others are also unreachable by a tourist bus, but they are reachable by jeeps and safari buses. So we can definitely go to Argaman, we can go to Yafit, we can go to Rimonim, we can go to Ibal, and enjoy the places and try to imagine how the Israelites worship there. I have to say that once I went to Argaman with the pastor, and after finishing the guiding in the site, he pulled out a prayer shawl from his backpack, put it on him, and walked around the Argaman footprint. He asked me to take a video of his, so maybe we can reenact some of the ceremonies that could have been done there. 2 more questions.
When you took us to Joshua's altar, it was a great experience to worship God, Hashem, at that place. And we just all love you and thank you. And thank you for this visit here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Dr. Shay. I have a question. I'm curious about the Jerusalem photo or the picture you showed us as a foot. In modern day, there's a road, there's a valley. It seemed like part of it, the soul, was the city of David today, right? So it was the idea that there was not a separation there between City of David and the Temple Mount, and it's connected on your photo like a complete foot. I'm just curious about that.
Well, I use it as a teaser in the middle of the lecture. because now that people see food, and now they can see also the Jerusalem thing. In Jerusalem, of course, there is no proto-theater. It's the walls of the first temple of the Iron Age period. It is based on topography, of course, the city of David and then the Mount of Moriah. So it's not a real food shape, but I did not build this thing in Jerusalem, in the museum. I just saw the picture and I said, oh, there is a food shape here. So I'm not sure that it was intended, but it's a nice possibility.
Thank you.
Very well. So thank you so much, Dr. Shay, for an amazing lecture. And thank you all for registering to this online course. And we will be hearing Dr. Ralph Hawkins next week on Sunday, who will speak about Joshua's Altar. Some of you may have already participated in the Joshua's Altar online course that we did a couple of months ago. So this might be a short of a small repetition. So we will try to spice it up and bring some exciting news from Joshua's Altar about a special lead tablet that was found on site, and we will share some exciting news about what was found inside that lead tablet and what the repercussions could be. So thank you, Dr. Shay, and thank you to all the participants. And from Israel, we bless you and wish, as we say, a Chodesh Tov, a new Hebrew month, the month of Adar. As we say in Hebrew, when Adar comes in, we have a lot of happiness, and Purim is very soon. And so we wish you a lot of joy, to you and to your families. And we hope to see you again on Sunday with Dr. Ralph Hawkins. Thank you so much, and shalom.